Friday, August 2nd, 1991, with Homer Hatt of 4303 West Timberwood Drive, Traverse City, Michigan, 49684, phone 616-938-3047, at EDC North, 4000 North Grand River, Lansing, Michigan. And Helen Earley of the Oldsmobile History Center. Well, Homer, why don't you give me your name and address and your phone number, and then we'll start our little interview. I appreciate your signing the agreement form. Your contribution will be a welcome addition to the Oldsmobile History Center files, because we don't have much on used cars. So who are you, Homer?
Well, Helen, thank you very much. I'm Homer Hatt. I live at 4303 West Timberwood Drive, Traverse City, Michigan. My phone is 616-938-3047.
And what's your mailing zip code at Traverse City?
49684.
Thank you. Okay. Homer, when did you hire in at Oldsmobile?
1942.
Okay. Do you remember the month?
Boy, I think it was in the summer sometime, I believe.
That's okay. What department did you hire in?
I started out as a mail boy.
Okay. Who hired you in?
Bill Mahoney and Bud Brandel.
Okay, and where was the personnel department in 42 then?
It was in the basement of Building 60.
And which end?
Would be on the
South end?
south end, that's correct.
Okay, so Bill Mahoney and Bud Brandon hired you in, and you were a mail boy.
Right.
Okay, and the mailing room then was?
Be on the east end of that same building on the ground floor.
Okay, and what was your duties as a mail boy? What were your duties?
Peddle mail out to the factory, to the different plants in the factory.
Through the plant,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So the mail was all sorted before you picked it up, or did you have to help sort it?
No, that was, what they'd do is they'd bring it out to us, and then we sorted it in by the various mail stops that we had to make.
You say they bring it out to
It was
you?
brought from the main building to the,
Okay.
we had a little desk out in the plant, wherever, what area we printed, or covered, I should say.
Okay, so what area did you cover?
Well, I covered different ones in the plant. That's where you first started. You started out in the plant.
Okay.
And you had different buildings as you moved.
Okay, was this a main plant only, or
Yes.
did you go to the other plants?
They had somebody else that did it over there. We did, but they did not work for us. They worked for somebody at that plant.
I see. Okay, how long were you a mail boy?
Boy. I would guess 2 years.
Then what happened?
Well, one day I was called into the man whose name was W.A. Smith Jr., and he was the budget director for sales department. And he called me in his office one time and he said, "How would you like to work in the sales department?" And of course I certainly jumped all over and said, "Sure will." And
Where was his office then?
he was on the first floor of the old Building 60.
Okay, the administration building.
Yes.
And which end was that, the north end?
Be just a little off the lobby, really.
Oh.
On the north side, but just first office off the lobby.
Okay,
That was all sales department at that time, and merchandising, marketing.
okay. So what was your job in the budget department?
Well, they worked it kind of funny. I was in sales a short period of time. Then I went into car distribution, which was part of sales. And I was there for a short time, maybe a year or so. And
Pardon me, but what did you do in the budget department? Do you remember?
in the budget department, I didn't work in budget until after I came back. Smith hired me, who was budget manager, and I just read and did general sales things to learn what the sales department was all about.
Okay.
Then they transferred me to car distribution, and in that department, why, we handled all the wholesale orders as the dealer sent them in, and were put into production and so forth to be shipped back as a built product to the dealer.
Now, Homer, was this mostly paperwork, or was there any mechanical devices to record the dealer wholesale orders?
No, it was all done
By
by hand. That's right.
I see. How often did these reports come in? They would come in?
Well, they were orders. They were wholesale car orders that our zone offices sent to us.
Okay.
And then we put them into production. And then the car was shipped back out to the dealer.
Do you remember how long it took after the order reached the factory for the car to be built?
Oh gosh, sometimes it took 3-4 weeks.
Okay.
Might even take longer because it was just after the war, and of course they weren't on a production basis like they could be now or are now.
So it wasn't until after the war that you actually went into car distribution?
That's right.
Okay. And who did you work for in car distribution?
The manager was T.R. Tafey, and Nolan Walker was the assistant manager.
Okay. Do you remember any other names in the department?
Yeah, Johnny Beadle, and Art Coble, Glenn Tooley,
Okay.
and I don't think there was any other men in there, really. I think that was it.
Remember any girls?
Gosh, I
Okay.
can't remember who they were right now. I can see them, but I can't remember them.
Well, Homer, how long did you work in car distribution?
I think I was there about a year, 2 years maybe.
How many orders would come in? Do you have an idea how many cars we were selling then or producing?
Oh, they were selling everything they could get, Helen, because after the war, why? I mean,
Right.
the dealers were just screaming for cars.
Sure.
So anything they could get, they'd ship it in. But of course, production limited to the volume because of due to part shortages and things that the other supplier plants weren't just back on production yet.
Okay. So after car distribution, what happened?
Well, I was in car distribution, and it's kind of a funny thing. I was called down to Mr. Smith's office on a Friday night about 5 minutes to 5, and Newt Barber was there.
Who was he then?
He was assistant general sales manager
For,
for sales. He was
did they have the country division?
east and west. Yes, they did. I think Newt had the east part of the country.
Okay.
And they said, "How would you like to go to New York?" Nobody wanted to go to New York, believe me.
Why?
Because the cost of living is so terribly high as to what your salary was going to be or your income would be. But I said yes because I knew if I said no, that'd be the end of it. And so they said fine. Saturday morning, about 10:30 in the morning, I got a phone call from Newt Barber, and he said, "Homer," he said, "we're going to change plans. We're not going to ship you to New York." He said, "So just come back to work in normal fashion on Monday."
What would your job have been in New York?
I'd have been the assistant car distributor, office manager. So I came back and we went to work, and I guess within a period of 2 months or less, I got another phone call. It was always on a Friday night at 5 minutes to 5. Walked in, same executives were sitting there again. "How'd you like to go to Cincinnati?" I said, "Okay, fine." Mr. Smith reached down his desk drawer and handed me the tickets, and he said, "You will be there Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Now, that was his own office.
Just like that, and that was it. I mean, boy, you had no time to think. All you had to do was go home, pack, and leave.
Well, now, Homer, what was your job in Cincinnati?
Well, I was assistant office manager, car distributor, but I was only there a short period of time when a fellow named Doc Watson, who was the car distributor, office manager, got very ill. And so the job was just given to me right within a period of just 3 or 4 months, maybe, or less.
What did office manager, car distributor do?
And we had to get all of the wholesale car orders from the dealers, and at that time, we had to call the dealers and tell them exactly what they were to give us back as orders, the trim color, paint color, body styles, the whole thing. They had to get those orders for us because at that time, we were just building to production, as the way production could build. And so it was
done by hand.
Everything's done by hand. In fact, we had to load the cars. In other words, if we had 5 states and 220 dealers
In Cincinnati?
in Cincinnati zone.
What were those 5 states?
Oh boy, let's see, it was Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, and Illinois. Parts of those states.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were all, but some were just parts, depending upon. It was all done geographically.
Yes, and how many dealers? You said 200?
220 dealers. And we had to hand load each order. In other words, when we sent the car orders to Lansing, they came in 4 at a time for a dealer, because that's the way they could put them on the tractor trucks and bring them back.
So what you're saying is the orders went in 4 at a time to the factory?
Yeah, or 8 or whatever the dealer, but they were in multiples.
Oh, I see.
So that's the way we did it. And if the dealer couldn't receive 4 cars, because it was all done by what they had sold prior to the war, on a percentage basis, if they weren't allowed 4 cars or whatever, we might have to bring a car into the warehouse, and they'd have to come maybe as far as Kentucky or Tennessee and come and pick that car up, because the truckers wouldn't drop it off if there was no place other to drop within 30 miles.
Oh.
So we had to do all that hand loading and all of that to get them into Lansing. But it was really, I worked about 7 o'clock in the morning till about 10, 11 o'clock at night, 5, 6 days a week. So there was, and then on Sundays I go to church, and on Sunday afternoons I'd be back in that office.
Excuse me, how many people were in the Cincinnati zone office at that time?
Oh, we had, I think, 5 district managers, a parts and accessories manager, 3 service reps, a service manager, business management manager, assistant zone manager,
And where was the regional manager located?
Detroit.
Who was regional manager?
I think it was Harry Banks. I think Harry Banks was regional manager at the time.
And your zone manager was?
Joe Folsom. The assistant zone manager was Bill Escher. And Dick Weaver was parts and accessory manager. Dick's here in Lansing yet. Bob Schiller was one of our district managers. Bud Coates was the business management manager. And I can't remember who some of the other fellows were, because I hardly ever saw that some of those fellows were out in the district all the time in their own areas, and I very seldom ever saw them.
You had 5 districts in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Homer, when was that the latter part of the 40s that you went to Cincinnati?
Yes. It's 46, 47.
46, 47.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So how does the factory do when they move a man from the home office to the zone, or from one zone to another? What about your home? Did you have a problem selling your home? Did the factory
fortunately, I
help
lived in an apartment, so it wasn't a problem.
you? Okay.
But they would if a
The
man
factory
had a home,
would
yes.
have helped you.
Yeah.
Okay,
But you have to locate your own place to live when you get there, because you stay in a hotel until you find a place to live.
I see.
And usually what they do is they say, just forget your job, go out and find a place to live, because they didn't want you forever living in hotels.
Sure.
So,
So an office manager car distributor had quite a wide range of responsibility, really, because office manager, you'd be
Oh, yeah.
managing the office to a point.
that's
wouldn't
right.
you?
Yep. We did it both.
I see. So,
Very fortunate we have very good girls, and it was no problem. I mean, our girls were
remember any of
excellent.
the girls' names?
Yeah, one of them's name was Mary Lutz. One of them was Beatrice Leonard.
Okay.
I can remember the girls, but I can't remember their names.
How long were you in Cincinnati?
I was there a little over a year, and I got a call one time from Mr. Ralston, Dave Ralston, who was his general sales manager. He said, I'd like to talk to you in Lansing. The only thing you think was, well, what did I do wrong now? And I got here, and he said, I got a proposition for you. He said, we're either going to send you to the Denver zone, or he said, we'd like to have you come back to Lansing and write some manuals for the operation of the sales department in the field offices. And he kind of indicated he'd rather have me come back to Lansing. He didn't say so. He said, you can do what you want, but. And when I had that but, why, you know it's... So I went back and I wrote the zone manuals and
Well, who'd you work for then?
went back to W.A. Smith's office.
I see. Now, well, what area was that, right in the budget department?
Yeah, it was general sales budget's what it was.
General sales budget.
Yeah. And I just really used the office because I was more concerned with all of the departments in the sales department had to provide me with everything that they did so that I could then turn around and put it into manuals to be shipped out to the field.
A real procedure manual.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. There was 2 manuals. One of them we called the office manual, and the other, the office manual, and the other was procedure manual. They broke it into 2 sections.
Now, how many departments were under general sales, Homer? Do you remember the names of all of those? You'd mentioned budget and car distribution.
Well, it was,
Was O&A organization?
yeah, dealer organization
Dealer
and
organization. Did they have a business management department?
yeah.
Okay.
George Wilson was a business manager when I was there.
Okay. Who headed up O&A?
When I went in there, it was Bill Escher, because
Okay.
Bill had also came back. Bill was in Cincinnati at the time I was there. So there's a very peculiar thing about this. When I was in Cincinnati, Bill Escher was there, Dick Weaver was there, I was there. Yeah, there was 3 men in the same office in Cincinnati were moved back to Lansing within a period of 60 days. Which is very unusual because it just doesn't happen that way, but it did.
Car distribution was another department under
That was
general
sales. Yep.
What about, was there a sales promotion department?
Yeah, there was sales promotion, advertising,
Advertising?
sales promotion.
PR, a department by itself then?
Yes, public relations was working directly with or for the general manager, I believe.
Okay.
I'm sure they were.
Was there any other departments that you can think of?
Boy, Helen, I can't think of any other ones because I
Okay.
think that would just about cover it all.
All right, we didn't have a fleet sales department then.
I tell you, the dealers were screaming so hard for cars that there was no place but just get them in the dealer's hands.
So,
There was no way.
was that the early 50s, 50 you came back to Lansing?
No? It's in the 40s, late 40s.
Late
I can't
40s.
tell you when.
Okay, that's all right. So, you wrote these procedures.
Okay, now I got the manuals done and I'm working up to this used car department.
Well, let me ask you one.
Sure.
During these few early years where you were starting your career at Oldsmobile, were there any comical incidents or funny incidents or unusual situations that you remember that might be interesting?
Gosh, Helen, I can't. At the moment, there's one thing, and I'll get into it later.
Okay.
But as far as being, because I mean, we were pushed so hard and so much that there was
You
very
really worked.
time that you really had to do much but work.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's the little things in the office that would come about, but nothing that would be unusual.
Where was your office when you were writing procedure manuals?
I was using W. Smith's office,
Okay.
which was, again, on the first floor, right just north of the lobby.
Okay. So then your next move was into used cars?
No, then I went, let's see, from Smith's office, I went back to car distribution. No, I'm sorry, I did not. I went into dealer organization department. I went to O&A department.
Okay. What did you do there? What, in fact,
Processed, well, what I did in dealer organization department, they processed, the whole department was there to process the appointment of dealers, new dealers, or changes of dealerships, or sellouts, or anything had to do with the dealer organization as such with a dealer. That's what we did.
Okay. Well,
So-
now, before we get off the dealers, let me ask you, suppose a dealer passes away, what happens to that situation?
Okay. They had an interim agreement addendum, which they signed, and a lot of them were signed with the dealer's son. Or maybe they were signed with a dealer's partner. So it keep the dealership running.
Okay. Was there one special person named on the agreement?
There was one, and there's unusual cases, maybe 2.
I see.
But it's usually just the dealer himself.
Is that the term, paragraph 3rd, is that the area that name appeared?
Boy, Helen, I can't remember.
That's okay, seems like I remember.
It could have been.
critical
It seems to me that it was. That's exactly what it was. I remember that now.
Mhm. So if a dealer passed away, there generally was some experienced person close to the dealership that could move, and the factory would approve.
That's right.
Into that dealer
Mhm.
point. Okay, well, did the factory ever decide to close out a dealer point?
Yes.
For some reason? Why would they close it out?
Well, because it was in a location where the dealership wasn't selling enough automobiles, because of the area responsibility, it might have been in a, well, take for example, a little tiny small area of no people. the dealership couldn't support itself.
Maybe the economic situation would change. Or
That's right,
social
it would change.
situation would change.
Absolutely.
I see.
And they would just eliminate the dealer point.
Okay, how few cars would that be in a small area that would
Could support itself?
Mhm.
Oh gosh, Helen, in those days, there were some of those dealers wouldn't get over 15 cars a year.
Okay, but they could sustain themselves.
They did it on service. A lot of their service would hold them there, but finally when the things got bigger and bigger, they just eliminated the points because
Okay.
they would just give it to some big dealer and he would take it.
Did we have many dual dealers then?
Oh yeah, we had more duals than we had exclusive. We were dual mostly with Chevrolet.
Okay, now in that case, who would be the business management dealer?
Chevrolet,
Chevrolet. Why was that?
just a bigger division.
I see. Okay.
In an old Pontiac dual, well, it'd be Oldsmobile.
Okay.
And they used to dual Oldsmobile Pontiac Buick together,
Mhm.
or it'd be Olds Cadillac, or old Chevrolet. See, it just depended on where the point was is how they do it, but most of them were Chevrolet duals.
Okay. Well, Homer, in an Olds Cadillac dealership, who would be the business management controller?
Most of them were Oldsmobile.
Mhm.
Most of them were Oldsmobile. Because Oldsmobile usually was there first.
Well, what would a dealer have to do or not do to merit isn't the right word, but to elicit getting rid of him?
Well, usually there were financial problems. 99% was because the dealer just went broke. He couldn't run a dealership, or he just didn't have the money to capitalize properly, and so usually that's what happened. Now, once in a while, I know of a couple big dealers that they actually terminated because they changed the odometers on cars, on used cars. And there were some big dealers that they just absolutely took their selling agreement away from them because that was playing
That
around.
was a violation of...
Well, that was not only General Motors, but of the United States laws. I mean, that's a federal law. You can't touch an odometer on an automobile.
I see. Okay,
So Oldsmobile just protected itself.
sure.
And then they just, in fact, I was the first used car manager at Oldsmobile that ever got out the odometer laws to the dealers. Because I knew the right people in Washington, and I got it, and I sent it out long before the other car divisions, and I was getting calls from all the used car managers about that one. But I had it out there before that ever really hit.
How can you tell if an odometer is turned back?
Well, when you first buy a new car, you get a statement that says the car had 10 miles or whatever it is, trucking or whatever. When you trade the car in, the dealer looks at the odometer and it says it's got 100, say 10,000 miles on it. There's a statement written, signed by the dealer, signed by the person that sold the car to the dealer, traded it in. The next person that buys that car gets a copy of that that says that this car had 10,000 miles on it. When it goes back in and he trades it in, you better not say it's got 8,000 miles on it. Because that tells you right there somebody touched the odometer. And also they can tell by looking at the numbers on the odometer. If you watch them very carefully and know what you're looking for, which dealers can do real easy, and used car men, there'll be little lines in there that show up to them. And that says somebody's played with the odometer. Or the numbers may not set perfectly straight.
Oh,
If those numbers are cockeyed or anything in there, then they know that somebody's played with it.
when you're visually looking at the instrument panel. And
That's right, if those numbers are all, if they're crazy, if they're up and down, or there's little lines in there, if they're not out of line or something, yeah.
That means the...
Somebody's played with it, yeah.
Okay. Well, then, is the dealer fined or canceled completely, you're saying?
Both. Either one or the other, or both.
I see.
Now,
When did you get into used cars?
that's what I was going to tell you next one. I had a real problem one time with management when I was in O&A department. I won't use any names, but one of the persons was very upset because there were 3 of us from the zone offices that were in that office, and he had never been in a zone, and he made it awful tough on the ones underneath him. So one time I just got mad. I walked in Bill Usher and I said, Bill, I said, you're either going to get me transferred, I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to quit or anything, but I'm getting out of here. And I said, if I quit, I said, I'm going up to Mr. Olson. I'm going to tell him why.
You reported to this man that was
Mhm.
disagreeable. Okay.
And he said, okay, let me see what I can do, because he didn't want me to go to Ralston, that's for sure. Well, anyway, the thing happened around, and all of a sudden he called me on one day and he said, how'd you like to work in the used car department? Well, Jack Trainer was a used car manager at the time. And he had called Jack in Kansas City, and Jack said, sure. He said, I will take him. Well, what Bill...
Jack was called about a job in Kansas City.
No, Jack was in Kansas City traveling, and he called, manager called him from Lansing and said, hey, would you like to have Homer Hatt work for you?
Oh, okay.
And so Jack said, fine. Well, prior to that time, what put me in used cars is when I was 14 years old, I was selling used cars. And so I've been in used cars a long time prior to that. So they knew that, and so it wasn't a problem, and I went into used cars. And I worked for Jack Trainer.
In Kansas City?
No, right in Lansing. See, Jack was traveling. He was just out there seeing some dealers in Kansas City.
I see.
And Lansing just called him when he was on the road and said, hey, and he said, sure.
Okay, and used car department was still under general sales?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And who headed, and Jack was the manager?
Jack Trainer was a used car manager.
Okay, so you worked for Jack Trainer.
Mhm.
Where was that office located then?
Well, they moved us out of the main building and put us over in a building 40, I think it was, or no. Anyway, it was another building right by the gates.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it was out of the main building. And they put some of the sales department people over there. They advertised, and some of the other people were
Would
over
that
there.
have been building 62, directly behind building 60?
Well, it was a building that would have been right straight south of it.
Oh, south. Okay.
Personnel was in there, and
Oh, yes, 28.
28, that's what it was, building 28. That's exactly what it was.
When was that, Homer? Do you remember?
Boy. I'm going to guess 48, 49,
Still
someplace
in
in
the
there.
late 40s.
No, I think that's not right. It was in the 50s sometime, Helen. It was in the
Okay.
50s. I know it was now.
Okay,
Probably in the late 50s.
all right, late 50s. So now you're over in building 28,
Mhm.
working for Jack Trainer in the used car department.
Right.
What do used car departments do?
Well, what we
Your
did,
job.
okay, we, first of all, would watch the used car market very carefully to see what our used cars are selling for, the Oldsmobiles, by series, by body styles and so on, what they were selling for at the auctions. We were also watching the dealers all the time to see if their used cars were getting to be a problem.
What, was there a level that over which it became a problem? You must have had some criteria to judge if a dealer wasn't moving cars. What was that?
Well,
Like a 30-day supply of
a 30-day supply, if they went to 40, 45, we were getting concerned, but if there went anything over that, then we found out what was wrong, and we would go call on that dealer and spend maybe 2 or 3 days with him to see what the problem was. And just give you an example, one dealer, the reason I would know where these dealers were is because the zone offices would call us and say, hey, I've got a dealer out here, it's a big dealer, he's got a used car problem. Would you come out and work with him? So that's how we would find out where these big dealers were and what happened.
So the zone must have had some report from the dealers
Oh, yes.
on how many new cars, how many used cars, how many cars in transit, how many in the warehouse.
Yeah, they got all of that off their business management statements.
Okay, now were things getting a little more computerized or mechanized or something?
Oh,
Done
not
by
too
hand?
much. Mostly by hand. Mostly by hand.
And that report would come in to the regional office?
Went to the zone and then to the region, then the home
Then
office.
the home office, okay. So now you know that the dealer out
So we would know, and they would call me, and for a good example, one time I got a call and I went out on a Sunday. I would usually go Sunday, so I'd be ready for Monday to be with the dealer. And I had a cab take me out to the dealership, and I just told him to pick me up in about an hour. And I just walked around the dealership and just kept looking at it, started figuring out what's wrong with this. All of a sudden I realized that the dealer, all he had on his used car lot was Cadillacs, 98 Oldsmobiles, Lincoln Continentals, and all the big cars. He had no small cars. Well, he had $1.5 million tied up in used cars sitting there. Well, so immediately when I saw what happened, when I went to see him the next morning, I had him bring his used car manager in and his statements. And I said, there's your money right there. And I said, get those cars to the auction, sell them, buy some smaller cars, and get your inventory turned, and so you got cars you can sell to the general public. Because all those big heavy cars out there, they're not going to be sold to the average used car buyer. And those are the kind of things we did. We also had programs for dealers where every quarter we'd ship them a whole kit of used car decorations, pennants, banners, things to put in the car windows, and everything like this, a decoration kit for the used car lot. We would also ship them contests that they could have internally.
Did they have to pay for these?
Yes, they subscribed to it.
Oh, I see.
And I would say we had about 70% participation.
Okay, so a dealer really didn't have to if
No.
they didn't want to.
You did not.
It was voluntary.
That's right.
Okay.
And I also worked with them on designing a new used car lot, or redesigning the car lot that they were on, or also designing or redesigning their closing office.
Oh, yes.
So anything that had to do, and lights, the lighting system on the used car lots, anything that had to do with used cars, that's what used car department did from Lansing. Went to lighting, designing, anything.
What about servicing these used cars prior to trying to sell them?
Okay, we also have
So we had reconditioning programs.
Yeah, we had reconditioning programs which were sponsored by General Motors. And they had reconditioning schools.
Okay, what were these programs like, reconditioning?
Oh, we taught the reconditioning people to, first of all, clean the car up properly, so it was clean, new tires. Then I went through a mechanical inspection. If there's anything wrong with the brakes, transmission, mufflers, engines, they were fixed prior to going out on the used car lot.
Now, who absorbed that cost?
The dealers would send their used car men to the reconditioning schools, and they were held in the training centers around the country.
GM training
Yes,
centers.
and they were, most of them were GM training instructors too. They were specialized just nothing but used car reconditioning.
Oh, I see.
Because we didn't have time to do it as used car managers to. I mean, it had to be done by somebody else, that's all.
So these dealerships, used cars service managers, I suppose, were the ones that were sent to the GM training centers?
Well, no, they call them recondition specialists is what they call them.
Reconditioning
Specialists, yes.
Okay.
They were working for the dealer.
How long a program was it?
Oh, maybe 3-4 days, maybe 2 days.
Okay.
Just depended on how fast they could get through with it. They liked to get them out of there within a day if they could, but it always took a couple of days. Because he went into paint work on some of the cars that needed painting and so forth.
Oh, yes. Well, then there must have been some type of guarantee when a used car is sold to a customer. Wouldn't there be like 30 days, 90 days?
Well, that depended upon the dealer. They put a, maybe, and they called it warranties. They wouldn't use the word guarantee. That was a naughty word.
I see.
Because you guarantee something, and it better be right, or they can sue you for it. So they always use the term warranty.
Okay.
And they did have warranties on some of the cars. A lot of the dealers did.
For a certain number of days?
Mm-hmm.
On anything major?
Yeah, miles or days, whichever, and they would,
I see.
the drivetrain and some of the heavy things they would guarantee for maybe 3,000 miles or 30 days or whatever the dealer thought that the car was warranted for.
Well, on a major, would it, like a drivetrain or an engine, would they ever put a new one in a used car?
I never have heard of a dealer doing it yet because it never happened, to my knowledge. Now, I'm sure it did, that they've had to replace it. But,
That'd be pretty costly.
oh, it sure would. Very expensive.
Well, Homer, did you work with the cost factor on reconditioning a car prior to selling it as a used car? Would you know what the mechanic earned or what the
Oh, yes.
price was?
Oh, yeah, that was, everything was figured into the price of the car. In fact, at the time a used car come in to the used car manager for appraisal as a trade-in, he pretty well knew about what was going to have to go into that car. And if he had any problems, he would get his paint man, for example, and say, all right, now how much is it going to cost to fix this, or the body shop if there was some body work done. So it was just done on a complete cost of reconditioning the car at the time the trade was made.
So actually, the person who appraised the vehicle must have to be pretty knowledgeable.
He's got to be very knowledgeable, because if he isn't, he misses it, and they can lose $1,000 on a used car real fast. So those people are they're usually pretty highly skilled people.
So they were trained too.
Yeah, a lot of that they just picked up themselves.
Okay.
Just over experience, that's what they did, because we didn't really train. We never trained anybody as appraisers. We did, though. I used to send out bulletins and pieces of literature to them telling them to watch for certain things.
Okay.
On a car, for example, say, and it's a very minor thing to a lot of people don't even know it. They buy a used car, they better check that brake pedal, because that brake pedal's worn. On the inside, that car's had a lot of miles put on it, because somebody's been playing on the brakes pretty heavy all the time or wouldn't wear that brake pedal off.
Oh.
Just little things like that you could look for and find. Or you could find where if a car had been repainted, we tell them right where to look for it to see where the paint wouldn't match, because we knew where those places were, and things like that.
Oh, yes. Well, now, Homer, there must have been bulletins that would come out from the factory on any factory fix on items or problem that had developed, wouldn't there?
Yeah, but that would be handled by
The
somebody else. Service department
new car
handle it.
service.
Yeah, service department handle that stuff. We didn't have anything to do with that.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, strictly that was all theirs.
So, like, here I'm turning my car in, and the appraiser tells me he'll give me $1,000 for it, and I think it's worth $1,200. Or some other dealer may have offered me $1,200.
Mm-hmm.
Why would there be a difference?
Well, it could be two things. One of them, it could be that the original appraiser missed something on the car that the other appraiser saw, or it could be that he just going to go for the high buck.
Okay.
That's all. He just wants to make more money on it. So he's not going to give you as much for the car.
Well, in the 50s, for instance, how much profit is there on the average used car?
Oh boy, Helen, that's awful hard to say.
Oh, that,
Could run anywhere from $300 to $2,000.
okay, depending on the
Make of the car, the demand for that used car, condition of it, and so forth.
But the same car didn't stay on a used car lot over 45 days.
Well, if it did, the dealer was crazy. He should have gotten rid of it. He should take it to the auction and sell it.
Well, now on an auction, that would be, he'd have to transport his cars to an auction.
That's right. He had to take them to the auction. He had to pay for the auction to sell his car.
Now, he had to his registration fee. He had
That's
to pay
right.
the transportation. He may have to go, what, 200, 300, 400
Oh,
miles?
could
sometimes
be.
To a good auction.
Very possible.
Okay.
So he had to figure all that. And usually, when a dealer had a car around, he was going to take a loss on it, and he knew it. He just wanted to get rid of the car then, before his losses got greater, that's all. So
Okay.
you just take it and sell it. And people have the wrong impression of auctions. They think that every car that goes to auction is a bunch of junk. That is not true. There's some beautiful cars go through the auction, but they're just because the dealer can't sell it. For some reason, the car won't sell for that dealer. Another dealer buy it and have it sold in 3 days. The only cars that and the auctions are I want to say this because the auctions are run very highly. Excuse me, they're run as a high-grade business. If a car comes in there, it's been a police car on the road. If a car's been wrecked, if it's been a taxi cab, or if it was burnt, they have to declare that to the auctioneer before the car goes on the auction block, and he will so tell the bidders.
What?
And there will be a red light flashing up above that car, which gets their attention real quick. Hey, there's something wrong with his car.
Oh, so actually the people bidding on it see the car. The car's...
Oh, yes, that car comes right out there, and it's right there in front of them. You can walk around, you look at the cars before they ever go on the auction to bid. They're right out in the parking lots, and the dealers go out and look at them.
But that time, you don't know if it's been, say, a police car. You don't know until...
A lot of dealers, a lot of the good buyers can tell there's something that has been used.
What about a high school or college driver education car? Wouldn't that fall under the same?
Not necessarily, because the cars usually don't get that many miles on them, and they're not driven constantly and so on, so they're usually in good shape. Now, once in a while, some will be dirty or something, but they're cleaned up. And,
okay, I see.
But the auctions are run very well. You have to declare it. If you don't, and you sell that car and there's something wrong with it, the auction will make you pay for it, or else they won't let you run any more cars through there. Because that's their name, and they've got to protect their business. So
very strict code.
That's right, and it's not junk. People get that crazy idea that everything goes to the auction is junk, and it's not true. So.
Do you remember any interesting experiences with dealers?
Well, I remember a lot of them. I walked into one dealership one time to see him about his used car problem, and he sat back in his office, and he looked at me and he said, "Who the hell are you?" I told him. I said, "Your zone office asked me to come down that you do have some things you'd like to get fixed on your used car lot." Boy, he's very abusive dealer. And I looked up on a wall and I saw two pictures. I saw one of them, a nice-looking young man in a football uniform, and I saw a beautiful horse picture. And I looked at him and I said, "Is that your son?" Right away, he changed his whole attitude. Told me all about the kid going to Yale and playing football. And I said, "The horse is a beautiful horse." He said, "Oh, I have a horse ranch." And before I walked out of there, the guy had his arm around my shoulder and took me to lunch.
And you helped him sell his car?
That's right. So, and I can repeat stories like that all day long, that some of the dealers were very, very abusive when you would go in to see them.
But yet you would be there to try to help them.
That's right. Well, I went to one dealer one time. I'll give you one, a funny one. I won't give you the city because everybody knows where he is, but it was a big, big city, and it was out of state. And they told me that this guy had problems, but they said he's got all kinds of money. He owned hundreds of acres right in this big metropolitan area. Beautiful big dealership. I walked in his office, and he was sitting there with an old World War I flying helmet, a leather jacket, riding boots, and those old flying pants.
He was wearing them?
Yeah. In the office was an old cot. And his office looked just like the city dump. They introduced me to him, and he started then screaming at me that I was down there from Lansing to persecute him. Well, after about 4 hours of this, I figured, boy, there's just no hope. Well, all of a sudden, the guy straightened out. We took care of our business. And I found out that he had no motorcycle, and he rode it downtown because he owned one of the big office buildings downtown, and he put that on the elevator and took it all the way up to the 10th floor where his office was. The guy was not mentally conditioned to even run a dealership.
How did he get all of his money to buy his property?
I don't know. I would say probably his folks owned a lot of that property, and it just went to him. So,
Heaven's sake.
oh, I had lots of good ones.
Speaking about owning dealerships, is there some illegal situation that doesn't allow an employee to have an investment in a dealership? Or could Olds employees buy half a story and still be working?
I don't believe so, Helen. I don't believe they would let them. I don't think they'd approve it. Because it'd get, that's right, exactly what it would be. And then anything had happened where they could say, well, see, he worked at the factory, so.
Okay. Well, Homer, what about after a person retires, well, maybe say they don't have any connection with the factory at all. Does the factory ever investigate where the money is coming from that the dealer is investing?
I think in some circumstances they do. If there's a doubt. But usually they know where his money was before he ever even applied, when he applies for that dealership. They pretty well know, because they have to know exactly what is going to keep that dealership running. And where's that money, and what's he's got, what's his net worth, and of course a lot of dealers that borrow money from GM too to go in the dealership.
Oh, Motors Holding?
Okay.
Yeah,
they'd borrow Motors Holding money too, and then they would pay them out.
Okay.
But I don't think. Oh, I used to publish, and I'm going to leave you one copy of it. They used to publish a magazine for the dealers.
Oh, my.
This one's kind of beat up.
Great.
Let me see if I got something. There's one, for example. I'm going to leave you that one.
Well, thank you.
And also, Helen, you talked about reconditioning. There's the guide. I can't give that to you. I'm going to give you all this someday, but I'm not going to give it to you just yet.
Okay.
I'll give you all of this stuff, but I want to take it home and look through it again.
All right.
But there was something that I published right there on reconditioning.
Very nice.
So it had it all. But I'll show you what's in here when we get through later.
Evaluate
But-
these cars.
But I used to do that by interview to dealers. I would go out and interview these dealers. I'd have camera people lined up way ahead before I get there and so forth to take all these pictures.
Oh, for their dealership, for your...
For this, right here, for this article, that's right.
Okay.
As you can see, there's dealers' pictures here
Mm-hmm.
and here.
Leo Rollins of R.L. Duke's Oldsmobile.
Yeah.
And he's located...
He was one of the first black dealers that we had.
Oh, he was?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
But see, it's all
Oh, my.
around the United States where I would go and interview these various people.
Mhm.
And their stories are in here, exactly what they did. And then at the end, I would recap something about whatever the article was about. See, those are minority dealers.
Very good. Now, this is dated, this is volume 18, number 3, Lansing, but let's see.
Season's greetings. It must have been at a Christmas
It's
time.
Christmas. We don't have a year on here, do we?
Yeah, that's unusual. I always thought we did it, but maybe we didn't. Well, anyway, you can tell it was right at Christmas time. Because that's why it says season's greetings on it. I know that right now. And you'll notice I wasn't so dumb. I went where it was all warm to do that.
Oh, very well done. We appreciate this.
But,
It'll be a pleasing addition.
But one of these days, I'm going to give you all of this stuff.
Well,
I've got manuals here. I've got a lot of pictures of the dealerships.
dealership.
Now, this was a film I made. I made a used car film, a complete film. And it went all over to the country. In fact, it went to Canada and it also went over to Europe. And this was just when I was interviewing some of the dealers before they filmed, just doing film breaks and stuff like that.
We're looking at some glossy prints here.
Mm-hmm.
Could you identify any of these people, Homer?
Well, this one right here, he's a dealer on Wichita, Kansas right now. He's got the old Cadillac dealership. I was just trying to think of his name. Oh dear. I can't think of it right now.
Put a little teeny 2 down here, and this is the horizontal picture. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men, and the man with the black hair and his hands on his hips was the Wichita, Kansas dealer in 50s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. 1957.
57, okay.
Do you want to keep that?
Well...
Or do you want me to wait?
Why don't we leave them all together?
All right, now I'll just give you the whole thing because I just want to go through it again. I just grabbed it real quick.
Sure.
Oh, another thing, Helen, I used to write articles for Ward's Used Car Marketing Report, which was a magazine that went out to all the dealers or to whoever.
Now, what would those articles cover, per se?
Well, anything on used cars that they would want, they would interview.
Help to sell cars, or...
Mm-hmm. Or
to look for,
what I thought about was going to happen in the used car market.
I see.
And,
Well, Homer, before we get off new dealers, how would a factory determine where it thought it should have a dealer point, an ideal location? How do they do that? Is that done by the divisions, or does General Motors do that?
usually by the division.
Okay.
If they had an area where, in other words, say you had two big dealers that had such a large area of responsibility that they couldn't get to another city or area that was developing, they may just take parts of their dealerships away and make a third area for them, for another dealer. Or in a big metropolitan area, you might find that you got one dealer on the east side of town and you need somebody over on the west side of town because it's just too big to handle.
Mm-hmm.
So they will just put a dealer there.
Okay, so the division could go ahead and do that without asking GM's permission.
I believe so. I believe they did. I believe if it was a big metropolitan area, I think they probably went to the corporation and discussed that, but if it was something else, I don't believe they had to do that.
Okay, well then, okay, now we're in this large area, metropolitan area, and we've decided we need a new dealer, new car dealer. How do you go about looking for a dealer?
Well, you usually have applications sitting in your office all the time from these people that want dealerships.
Okay,
Or you might pass the word around to some big dealers and say, hey, we're thinking about putting a dealer point in there. How do you know that might want to get involved, or do you want the dealership? You know, we got dealers that own 2, 3 dealerships.
well, Lansing here,
Oh, yeah, Lansing's a good example of it.
University and Storage.
Sure.
Okay, and
No.
that's permissible under the setup.
If it's approved by everybody in God's world, they'll let them do it, but sometimes they don't like to do that either, because you get a dealer and he's just sitting kind of like a monopoly, and you don't get any bidding between he and his other dealership because they're both run by the same company.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got somebody coming to trade a car in a dealership A, and the guy doesn't think he's getting enough money for it, he's going to go to dealership B. Well, the dealership A can call a used car guy over there and say, hey, I offered him $1,500 for that car. The guy comes in, I'll say, I'll give you $1,500 for it.
So competition is
Competition is very healthy in the automobile business.
necessary.
It sure is.
So, Homer, who sets the price? Now, these manufacturers suggested retail price on the new car. I know the factory sends those lists to the dealers. So, I'm selling you my used car, and you were giving me $1,000 for it, and the company, the car company suggests $2,000 for the new car I'm buying. The dealer, is it his option to sell that car for $1,800?
He can sell that
or
car.
$2,200?
He can sell it for anything he wants to.
I see. Okay.
When he buys for that car, when he pays for that car, he can take it and run it in the river if he wants to. It's his car.
Okay.
The factory cannot, after he's bought the car, they cannot dictate to him what to sell it for.
So really, the dealer, in a way, has a responsibility to the factory, but he is an independent merchant.
That's right, and so it's his prerogative to whatever he wants to sell the car for. After he gets that new car, he can do anything he wants with it.
Okay. Well, now, in dealing in the used car market, Homer, there must have been some service problems. Did you run into those?
Are you talking about cars that had problems and they had to bring them back
Yes.
to the dealership?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of
Get
them.
into that.
We did, and most times, I would say 99% of the time, if there's something happened to the car within a short distance of time or something, the dealer would fix it. That was the end of it.
Okay.
And there were sometimes you'd run into an occasion where a dealer would tell a guy to go fly a kite. He's not going to fix the car. He bought it, and that's it. But those are rare occasions, and a dealer does that. All he's doing is hurting himself, because he's just word of mouth. You know, is the most great advertising in the world, or it can be the worst deadly advertising in the world. Because if you go out and say this dealer sold me a used car and it's no good, and he wouldn't fix it, it doesn't take very long for that word of mouth to get all over real quick. And people say, hell, I'm not going to buy a used car from him because if something happens to it, he ain't going to fix it. On the same token, you can say, you know, I had my car out and I drove it 1,000 miles and water pump broke on it, dealer fixed it. Well, boy, that guy's a pretty good dealer, so we'll go his used car lot.
So you traveled a lot when you were working in used cars.
I sure did.
Sure. How many people did you have working for you?
I had one person who stayed in the office all the time and a secretary.
Who was that person in the office?
It was usually some of the trainees that would come through all the time, and they would keep them right
Okay.
there.
Who was your secretary?
Boy, I had a bunch of them. I had Phyllis Fitzpatrick was one. Valerie. I just thought of it the other day. I can't think of it right now. And then I had another gal. She went on the plant. I had about 3 or 4 of them. I can't remember who they were.
Okay.
Valerie Lawrence. That's who she was.
Okay.
Valerie Lawrence. That was the gal.
You mentioned Dave Ralston. What kind of a man was he to work with?
He was the greatest guy that ever lived. Boy, he was a peach. He was big, he was tough, but boy, was he fair. You did a job for Dave Ralston, he never forgot it. And that's the kind of man he was. He was terrific. Just a terrific guy.
Now, Jones followed him, didn't he?
Yep. G.R. Rocket Jones.
Right. What kind of a man was he?
He was quite a bit like Dave Ralston.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like Dave Ralston. When he spoke, you could hear him 4 floors away. He was like Dave Ralston quite a bit. And I remember we had a sales manager named Sutherland, Vic Sutherland. Vic wasn't there too long. Vic passed away. Mike Mering, he was there for a while, and Mike left. Gosh, you can't remember some of the other people. I know that Harry Banks was in there. He was assistant.
Were you there
Gosh, I can't
when
remember.
Stroud was there?
Very fine man. Jim Stroud was one of the greatest guys. He was very calm, very quiet, and he knew the answers. Jim Stroud would have been, I'm sure, the sales manager someday. Jim Stroud was very, very well liked. Everybody liked him.
Assistant to General Sales Manager for the West.
In fact, when he was killed, I was laying in bed that morning listening to my radio. And it said 2 Oldsmobile executives were killed in an air crash. And I just sat right up in bed. And one of them was Jim Stroud, the other one, I think it was Carl Deast.
Carl Deast, right.
He was his own manager in St. Louis, I believe, or someplace out there.
Regional manager.
Or someplace, I can't remember where he was.
In Denver.
Oh yeah, because I remember. But they've had some sales managers in there that I often wonder how they ever got there, but.
Did you work for Emmett Feely?
Sure did.
Who did you report directly to then when you were used car manager?
Usually director of marketing.
And who was that?
Margie Seaton at one time.
Well, was he? What kind of a man was he to work with?
Oh boy, oh Marg, he was, you better dot the I's and cross the T's.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, he was efficient. If you used the word that just didn't fit properly, he would change it. Quite a guy. Margie was a nice guy. I never had any trouble with him.
Mm-hmm.
I liked him a lot. But he was real nice.
Then after Morgie came,
We had, who was it? Al Schlesinger was in there for a while
oh,
as director of marketing.
okay, what kind of a man was
Oh.
he to work with?
Greatest guy in the world. I just loved him.
Mm-hmm.
Al Schlesinger. He's sales manager Pontiac now, general sales manager
Yes.
Pontiac. Well, I worked with very unusual circumstances. I worked with Bob Berger when he was in Lansing, who was general manager Chevrolet. John Granberger, who's the general manager of Cadillac. Pete Gerosa, who's the sales manager right now of Cadillac. John Martabano, who's the sales manager of Saturn. We all worked at Oldsmobile at the same time. And I still communicate with those people. John Granberger called me up not too long ago and asked me what was going on in the used car market.
Hmm.
In fact, I bought a Cadillac from him first when I strayed from Oldsmobile.
Well, Homer, how did you keep your finger on the pulse of the values in the used car market?
Well, when I retired, Oldsmobile had me come back as a consultant for a while.
Oh, when did you retire?
77,
Okay.
77, 78, something like that. I've been out there about 13 years, I think.
Okay. So you came back, they asked
Then
you
I,
to come back?
yeah, I couldn't work for Oldsmobile, as you know, but I worked through Tom O'Brien Agency,
Okay.
who used to do my writing on these magazines and everything. But it just reversed then, and I went to work for them and did some work for them for Oldsmobile.
How long were you a consultant then, through Tom?
Oh, I'd say maybe a year or so. And then I had dealers that I worked for a while that wanted me to work with them as a consultant.
On helping them move used cars?
Mhm.
And,
Yes.
I see.
And then I got tired of that, and I said, I don't need this. So I just retired.
Mm-hmm.
And once in a while, somebody asks me something, well, I'll work with them, but for anything steady, no. But I did it for a while.
Well, Homer, in your experience in used cars, is that a lucrative market for a dealer?
Well, I'll tell you this, Helen. If you'll recall, during the war, there were no new cars built.
True.
We lost some dealers, but there's a lot of dealers we didn't lose, and the thing that kept them in business was the service department and the used car department, because that's all they had to sell, was service and used cars. And you asked me a minute ago about traveling. I traveled probably 8 months to 9 months a year and probably I would be gone half of each month or more. And I was gone a lot. And I would leave a lot of times. I go to church on Sunday, go right to the airport, and I'd be gone. But I'll tell you what saved me, and it's the truth, and anybody that says it's not, I don't believe them, a good secretary. Because I used to get my mail over the phone, and I would dictate my letters back to them, and those girls would handle that stuff for me. And there's a lot of mail I never saw. They would just write the letters and sign my name, and it'd be gone. I never even saw it. So anybody says the secretary's not best, they better think again, because those secretaries, in my opinion, are probably, a lot of them, in fact, my opinion, a lot of them know more bosses do. Because I've seen it happen where those girls are actually run the place and the boss sits there. And there was something else I was going to mention to you right now. Gosh, what was it? It had to do with this, with used cars. Come to my mind, I just lost it.
Well, maybe it'll come to you. The values?
Oh, I know what it was. We used to also be very close to the auction. The National Auto Auction, the National Used Car Dealers Association, and we were very close to all of the used car managers of all the car divisions, not just General Motors, but Ford, Chrysler, you name them. And we used to have regular meetings with these guidebook owners also.
Oh.
And we used to go speak at a lot of the used car conventions, state, local, or national, at the Auto Auctions Associations, state or national, or used car guidebook people. So we were very, very close. That's where we had a real good network. And the used car managers of all the car divisions were in close touch with each other. I used to call a Ford used car manager, or Chrysler, or they'd call me, and so we would hold meetings where we would be together for 2-3 days and see exactly what was going on in the used car market.
Oh.
So it was a very, very, as I say, in the used car guidebooks, we used to have meetings with all the used car guidebooks and conventions, and they would be gone. We would take them to meetings and things, just so that we were very close to touch. And we used to go interview these people. I used to go interview down a Black Book, NADA book in Washington, D.C. We go in Bob Kelly Blue Book in California.
So you go interview the publisher of the
Oh,
book
yes.
to get a figure.
That's right. Well, I want to know how they got their figures,
I see.
because every one of them got their figures in a different manner, and I found out how each one of them did it. And there's a big, big misconception in the used car world right today, Helen. You'll see somebody say, the Blue Book price of that car is.
Yes.
They are very wrong. The only Blue Book that's published is a California book, and it's for the state of California only.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's right. You got a red book out of Chicago, you got the black book out of Gainesville, Georgia, you got the NADA guidebook out of Washington, D.C. So you see there's different books for different areas.
Oh.
Now some of them, like the NADA book, publish for every area in the United States. So does the black book. The red. But anyway, just to end up on the used car guidebook companies, we were very close to them, and they were very close to us. So we knew exactly all the time what was going on, and if there was a problem, they would tell us even before it hit. In other words, the Cutlass used to be the hottest used car market in the world. If a Cutlass started to fall in price someplace, they would call me right away and say, hey, you got something wrong, problem out here with your used cars, because we're getting figures that show that the cars is decreasing in value. Well, then I would immediately get to some of the auctions and find out what was going on and why the car, and most of the time when I found out the Cutlass was going down in value is because the Cutlasses that were coming in were absolutely junk. The good ones were never going to the auction because the dealer didn't have to sell them. He would sell them off his used car lot. And that's what would depreciate the car, because these cars were coming in very high mileage cars, repaints and all this stuff, and as soon as they hit the auction block, the other dealers didn't want it because they knew what it was. And that's why the car went and would depreciate in value.
Well, Homer, who coordinated all of these used car groups getting together? Like you say, you met at different times.
Usually the corporation.
Oh, GM?
GM.
Okay. Or Ford would Ford...
Usually it was GM or the National Auto Auction would do it, or maybe the used car guidebooks.
Okay.
Or maybe individually as a car division,
Okay.
we would do it. So,
I see. So there was a cohesive working arrangement among the other.
oh yes,
car
very
companies.
close. We were very close. If there was something, we would see where we'd get together and discuss it and handle it.
Would the car companies, if Oldsmobile had a certain type problem, would Ford and Chrysler say be having a similar problem, or was there once in a while something unique to Olds?
Not necessarily. It would usually be by a car series, maybe as a Ford, maybe Buick, or, you know, anything. Could be Chrysler's, Plymouth. It depended upon how good the car sold new. There's the whole answer to the used car market. How good did it sell if it sold new? That's why the Cutlass, for example, I used, because the Cutlass was a very, very hot car. The Delta 88 was a very hot car.
Now this.
But when they sell new, that means they're going to be in demand used. If they don't sell very good new, they don't want them when they're used either.
I see.
It's just that simple. And it's that way today's market, right now. Whatever is good new is going to be good used. But you get a car out there, people don't like new, and boy, when it comes on the used car market, nobody wants it. It's just that simple.
Well, now, Homer, you were there as used car manager during the muscle car era, 68 through 72.
Yeah.
What about muscle cars? Are they good buys as used cars?
No.
They aren't. Why aren't they?
A specialized person wants that car.
Okay.
General public don't care about that type of car. They want a family car, a four-door car that's a comfortable automobile. They don't want something that's an unusual car. That's a specialized buyer that's going to buy that car.
And the market is the slim market, small market.
That's right.
Okay.
So it's not a car that's really in demand.
Homer, are you aware in your experience from the past to applying it today of the black market in used cars where they're switching serial number plates and body spec plates and engines even?
Those are usually cut shops that are doing that, and they're cutting them up and doing that to them. But it's only a specialized car that they're after, like the Corvettes and some of the real, should I say, specialized cars. The everyday car, they don't want them.
The family type car, you're saying.
That's right. They don't care anything about that. They want that real expensive automobile that they can play with and sell it for a lot of money. The ordinary car, they don't. Well, they'll steal tires and wheels and things, but I'm talking about where they really work on them in the cut shops. That's the highly specialized cars that they want. So.
Well, Homer, what about some of these customized cars, like the Hurstols? And did you get involved in any used cars like that? Or
we did, but not much, because again, it was a highly specialized car, and the person that bought the car knew either two things: he kept it for a long time, or the other one is he got rid of it quick. And used cars, again, on the used car market, that car was again a specialty car, and there had to be a certain type of buyer that wanted it. And some of the dealers wouldn't even buy that stuff when it was used. They didn't want it.
okay, hard to get rid of.
Well, if you take a farm community, for example, you could set one of those cars out there in a used car lot. That thing is going to sit there for 5 years. They're not interested in that car. They want a nice four-door or a pickup truck. They don't care about that specialty car.
Well, then it's up to the dealer just what he wants to take in as a trade-in.
That's absolutely right. And I'll tell you, Helen, I had an experience of that just the other day. I have a neighbor that's right across the street from me, and he couldn't buy what he wanted in Traverse City. He couldn't. I mean, they just wouldn't work together.
The Olds dealer?
Yeah, and the other dealers too. He was looking at anything. He came down here to Lansing, and he traded the car in for more money than they would pay him up there, and he bought a car here. So you see again, but the dealer here that he bought the new car from said, I don't want that car because I can't sell it. He's talking about his used car that he was going to trade in. And he went and sold it to a used car dealer.
Oh, this man that wanted to buy the new car?
Yeah. He went and sold it to a used car dealer because the new car dealer didn't even want it.
Well, now, would a used car dealer have given him more?
No, a used car dealer is going to jack him down a little bit because he knows that he wants to get rid of the car. And as soon as he knows that you want to sell it, he's going to set his price on it then.
I see.
And used car dealers usually don't buy used cars unless they got them sold, unless it's a very good, clean, nice automobile. But a lot of times when they go to the auction, they go there for a specific reason, to buy a car or cars that people have come in and asked them for. Because they just don't go buy a lot of used cars just to take them and fill them on a used car lot. A lot of times they buy them for very specific reasons.
Well, let me ask you, now Homer, say a person goes in, he's got a car to turn in, to trade in. But first he asks the dealer, he doesn't tell the dealer that he's got a car to trade in.
Mhm.
He asks the dealer, how much is this Cutlass Holiday?
Mhm.
The dealer quotes him $3,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then the person says, well, I've got a used car that I want to turn in my car.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make a difference if the dealer knows in advance on that trade-in value of the car?
No, because the dealer's looking at that car, excuse me, regardless of what it is, it's new.
Yeah.
All right, if he says, I'm going to sell you the car for $10,000.
Okay.
Then you say, well, I got a trade-in. He says, okay, I'll give you $3,000 for your trade-in.
Okay.
Still $10,000. You owe him $7,000.
Oh.
So it doesn't make any difference, really. He knows what he wants out of that car. And he might even say, well, you got a good trade-in here. I'll give you a little more for your trade, or I'll give you $1,000 off the new car. Because there's always a field of play in there between the price of the used car and the price of the new car. And they always have that money that they can play with, because they know how much it's going to take to fix the used car, how much they're going to sell it for. They also know how much money they got in the new car. So that gives them a factor of the trade-in, plus how much money does he want to make on the new car. Or he may say, I'll give it to you at this deal, make it all on the used car. All right, you may say, all right, I told you $10,000, but I'll tell you what, I want to sell you this car for $8,000.
Oh.
But when the trade-in comes in, instead of giving you $7,000 for it, he may give you $6,000. But you don't know that he's what he's in his mind. So he's going to make all the money on the used car when it's sold and not on the new car.
Oh, I see. Okay. I thought
They have to make it. No, there's no way that they're not going to make their money. They got to make it someplace. But if they're a good used car, they might say, hey, I'll give him a little more off the new car, but I'll pick it up on the used car when I sell it. Because a lot of used cars today are sold by miles. A lot of used cars are sold by mileage, not by appearance. I mean, sure, they got to be nice. But if it's got low miles on, if you had two cars exactly alike, look just exactly the same, and one of them had 75,000 miles on it and the other one had 40, the 40,000 mile car is going to sell a lot faster than the other one. Because people look at that speed, and they've got to stop that, because those cars were always that way before the odometer law went in there, believe me. They were all turning them back. The car that you bought with 50,000 miles maybe had 80,000 on it. So there's no difference really, except now the true miles are on that car, and the people are going to have to get used to saying, well, geez, that car's got 75,000 miles on it. Well, it had 50 on it when they bought it before, but it still had 75 on it. So,
how many miles should a well-built Oldsmobile run? A Cutlass, for instance, before you begin to have or think about a major repair?
Well, Helen, I know a guy that's got two of them right now, and he's got over 150,000 miles on them. He's a doctor. He lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And there's over 150,000 miles on each one of those cars.
Now, this is pretty much city driving?
All over. He drives them up, and he's very old now. His wife drives him. And they come up here. In fact, they were at our house about 2 weeks ago. They live on Lake Bel Air in the summer. And both those cars got over 150,000 miles on them. One of them's a station wagon, the other one's is a 98, I think.
He's taking good care of a fine car, isn't he?
I'll tell you, I don't think he takes care of them the way I would. I think what he does is put oil in when they need it and run them.
Really? Well,
Oh,
built
I
to
tell you.
begin with.
That's right. Those automobiles are... If he wouldn't trade them in, they wouldn't give him 15 cents for them because of the high miles, but he'll run them and they fall apart and get new ones. That's
They're
what
worth
they'll do.
more to him that way.
That's right. Oh, yeah, to trade in, it'd be nothing.
Homer, do you have anything else you'd like to add in your experience of the used car business for Oldsmobile? You managed it for a good many years. You contacted 100 million dealers.
Yeah, I have a big map, and when you come up to Traverse City, I'm going to have you come over. I want you to see this map. I put pins in every city I was in.
Okay.
And I've got pins in every, that map is nothing but red pins. I know what I was going to tell you. Something as a sidelight.
All right.
When I was, excuse me, when I was used car manager, I used to sell a lot of used car signs to dealers for their used car lot, identifying that as their used car lot. And I did a big business of that. Well, General Motors decided they were going to standardize all of the signing program of all of the dealers. Every dealer, it's a General Motors dealer, is going to have same size signs, only with their emblems and logos and things. So they called me in, and they asked me if I would design Oldsmobile signs for them because they knew I saw a lot of used car signs. So I redesigned the signs for Oldsmobile for the dealers, and those are the signs that they have right now, and they're selling them right today. And that was another little sidelight that I had to do besides being used car manager. Until I got it off the ground, then it pretty much handled itself. But there was about 2 years there that it was a real problem getting all those signs up. But I did that. I designed those signs, and they're different colors, and you'll see them. I mean, you see them every time you go by a used car dealer or a new car showroom. I mean, the Oldsmobiles, the used car sign and the new car sign.
How many dealers does Olds have?
Helen, I can't tell you what they've got right today. I don't know.
When you were there in '77, do you remember? Over 3,000?
It was over 3,000, I'm sure. I know it was. I think it was closer to 4 something.
Could be.
But I loved my work. I enjoyed it very much. And as I said, I don't think a hotel in the United States I haven't been in sometime or other as far as big city is concerned.
Well, and you worked with all the zone managers, too.
I sure did.
Some of the, let's see, you mentioned regional manager, you mentioned Harry Banks.
Oh, yeah.
How was he to work with?
Easy. I always liked him. He's a nice guy. He was very calm. He's smart as hell. He was very calm. You know, I never see Harry Banks. Well, a couple of times I see old Harry's first stand up pretty much when somebody was doing what he knew they shouldn't be doing. And old Harry could really chew you up, but generally he was a real fine guy. I liked him. Very quiet sort of a fella. He was just a nice guy. I didn't know him real well, but I knew him well enough to, you know, go and sit in his office and talk with him and stuff like that.
What about Elmer Kosek? Did you work with him?
He was in Cleveland, I believe.
Okay.
I didn't know him very well. I didn't know him too well at all. But now there was Jim Hill.
Okay.
Jim ended up assistant general sales manager in Lansing. He was in Texas, I believe. Of course, there's Bill Buxton, who was sales manager.
What kind of a man was he to work with?
Well, Bill was fine. You know, he very cooperative. But I really didn't have a lot to do with Bill. Only when there would be some kind of a meeting or something, he would want me to put a presentation for him together on used cars and things like that.
Okay.
But
did you ever work with a general manager, Wolfram?
not very much. Once in a while he'd call me up if he wanted his wife's car sold. He'd call me, then he knew me. Outside of that, he didn't know me.
Right, okay.
The best general manager we had, in my opinion, was a guy named John Belts.
Yes.
John Belts, and I went to school with John Belts.
Oh.
And John was absolutely fantastic. He would call me and have me come over look at engineering cars before they were going to hit the road and ask me what I thought of that car and if I thought it was going to be a good used car. That was very unusual. He did that.
Interesting.
And if we went to a national automobile dealers meeting, and instead of me going commercial, he would insist that I go on the GM plane with him. And John was just a fine guy. I just loved him. You couldn't beat him.
Metzel, did you work with him?
I just knew of him. I didn't.
Okay.
Some of those general managers were unreachable, you know, as far as I was concerned.
Howard Carroll.
Yeah, I knew him.
See, you had gone before Sanchez came in. What about Cook?
Yeah, Bob Cook and I went to school together too, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
And Bob lives right up in this area right now, up in the Traverse City area, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with Bob, as I said, he would ask me about used car things and so on, but I really didn't get that close to him after he was general manager to really say I would worked with him. He would ask me things, but that's about all.
Now, other zone managers, every time you'd go into a zone or visit dealers in that area, would the zone know you were coming?
Oh yes, they would call me.
And that was your purpose in going?
Oh yeah, they would call me and ask, they would set it up for me to come and see that dealer. And they would have my hotel arranged, they'd have me picked up at the airport and taken to the dealerships and so forth.
Okay.
And there was times when I never even went into his own office.
Okay.
I didn't even go in his own office because I'm going to have been maybe 150 miles away from that zone.
Did you then later make a report to the zone on your contact? That wasn't part of it? Okay.
No.
Well, Homer, did you have any comical situations where you would be talking with dealers, or real bad situations where you couldn't get the cooperation of a dealer?
Oh, sooner or later I've had, as I mentioned to you prior, some of those dealers, but I could get to them. But I really had one that was the best one I ever had in my life, and it was in Amarillo, Texas. A guy named was Bob Gardner. And Bob would call me up and I would talk to him. I was always trying to get him to put all new used car signs up. He told me he wasn't going to do it. So I said, I'm coming down there and I'm going to put those signs up whether you like it or not. Because we had quite a thing going back and forth, and I never even met him. I walked into his office, a gorgeous plant he had. Just a beautiful building and the whole thing. And his girl said, well, Mr. Gardner's waiting for you. And it had a swirl stairway that walked upstairs to this office, and it was a magnificent thing. I opened the door and walked in this office, and here sat a guy that must have been about 7 foot tall and weighed about 300 pounds. He looked at me and he said, what the hell do you want? And I thought it was Gardner because I didn't know him. I'd never seen him. He reached down, he pulled a great big 45 out of his desk and set that gun right down in front of me. He said, all right, now, he says, what do you want? I said, well, I come down here to sell you signs. He said, what did I tell you before you came down here? I'm not buying a damn thing from you. And boy, he had me scared then. Because it wasn't only the sign program, I was also going to interview him as a used car story for one of these magazines. And I thought, boy, if this guy won't talk to me now, how's he ever going to talk to me about this used car story I want? All of a sudden, this went on and on and on, and pretty soon I heard somebody laughing. And I thought, what's this? And this office was so big, it had a coat closet and bar and everything behind it. Well, Bob Gardner was standing right behind that wall listening to this whole thing all at the time. And finally, he walked out of there. He couldn't hold himself any longer. He was laughing so hard. He come out there and he says, I'm Bob Gardner. Boy, if you'd heard what I told him about that time. And this great big guy was an auctioneer. I didn't know who he was. And he walked over to me and he said, I'm sorry. He said, Bob wanted me to do this. He said, I didn't want to do this to you. And he was just as sweet as could be, see. And so there was one of the stories that, oh, Bob really nailed me good. But I had all kinds of them. I was on aircraft that had engines blow up, followed me in with fire trucks.
When was that?
Oh, during my course of travels.
What do you mean, an engine blew up while they...
On an aircraft, and an engine up right out over Miami Bay one time. I was going to New York.
Well, it must have had more than one engine.
It did, and the guy flew it all in. He flew it in on 2 engines, all the way to Philadelphia. Boy, I didn't like that one. And I've been hit by lightning. I was hit by lightning twice on planes.
What happens then?
You're scared to hell. That's what happens.
What happens to the plane?
Well, fortunately, these 2 planes I was hit, they didn't catch fire or didn't damage the aircraft. But it's just like somebody shot a big cannon off right down in the middle of the aircraft when it cracked so. It's just a big orange blob. I tell you, oh God, I've had a lot of them. I was followed in many times. You look down on the ground and see these fire trucks all lined up on both sides of the runway. As soon as that plane hit the runway, they were right behind you, following you right in. And they never tell you what it was, but I knew that we had problems. And
Oh, yes.
I was almost hit one time by a 747 coming into Los Angeles. We were down, and all of a sudden the aircraft just took off right up full tilt as fast as he could go, right straight back up in the air. Captain said, if you look down there, he said, you'll see why I did that, and here's another 747 taking off. He'd have lit right on top of him.
You had some
I had
close calls, Homer.
Oh, I had lots of those, lots of them.
That never frightened you about traveling by air.
Oh, I was apprehensive at times, I'll tell you that. There was times I wish they didn't have to go back out there again, but... And I've flown in through tornadoes It's a very weird experience. That plane's all over the air. It's just terrible. Got caught in one of those coming back in from Miami one time, and it started landing. You start coming down to go into Detroit about Cincinnati. And so we started coming down, and we were right in this tornado. And boy, it just threw that plane all over the sky. But there's a lot of good times to it, too.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it. But when I retired, I had had enough. I was tired. And
How old were you when you retired?
55. And I was tired. I had flown so much, and I just kind of burned myself out. That's what I did. And the hours were bad. And I enjoyed it, though. I loved every minute of it.
You want to add anything else?
Gosh, Helen, I don't think so. I think you about got my life story.
Well, you know, Homer...
As far as used cars.
Well, that's
not going to go into the rest of it.
I really appreciate your wanting us to have this used car value notebook and some...
Oh, wait a minute here. Let me look here. Let me look real quick.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad you made some notes.
Oh, yeah, I used to give a lot of presentations to the 10 top dealer group. There were the 10 top dealers in the country.
Were these
Oldsmobile dealers.
Used car?
Oldsmobile dealers.
Oh, but...
And I would talk to them about used cars because naturally used cars were a big item with them.
Oh, now, would you write your own presentation?
Mm-hmm.
I see.
I would let it go through whoever the general sales manager was. So I'd let him see it first because once in a while there'd be something in there that he didn't particularly like.
Okay. So these were in various selected areas around the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And would there be other people making presentations too?
Not necessarily. I might be the only factory man there.
Okay.
And sometimes they would ask me if I would leave for an hour or two because they were going to get into some pretty bolts and nuts things of those dealers themselves, you know. And they didn't want that particularly to go back to the factory, so I would just leave. And
so this would
then
be
they'd come back.
Dealer group you would be talking.
That's right, top 10 dealers in the United States.
And they would be asking you to make your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's right. Oh, you asked me about other zone managers. We had Chuck Hebard, who was also up in new cars and used cars for a while. Dan Steele. Mm-hmm. Dan retired as a regional manager. He was also merchandising manager.
How was he to work with?
Oh, Dan was great. I liked him. I liked him a lot. He was a great guy. In fact, I'll tell you how I got to be used car manager. Jack Trainer was promoted to Detroit as his own manager, and then they brought in like Chuck Hebard and Dan Steele from the field to give them experience in the home office, and I worked for those men. And one time, Dan Steele, I got a call. I saw my secretary getting these calls. That was when I was still the assistant. I was assistant used car manager, and Dan Steele was used car manager. And I know she's getting these phone calls all the time. And she kept saying, well, he isn't here. And I said to her, when she hung up, I said, who is that? She said, the sales manager. I said, well, he calls back. You put him on the phone. I want to talk to him. Called back, 5 minutes. I said, well, Bill, it's Bill Buxton. I said, I know where Dan is. I said, he's going to Detroit to a meeting. He said, can you catch him? I said, I don't know, but I'll try. And I called his wife in Okemos. She got in her car and she caught him about by Howell. And Dan came back in and he looked at me and he says, who the hell are you to call me back here? I said, I didn't call you back. The guy sits downstairs in that big office did. And Dan was gone for about an hour or so, and Dan says, well, he says, I just got a promotion. I said, what's that do for me? He says, you go out there and pick all your stuff out of that desk and bring them in this office because you are now the national used car manager. And I said, well, how did that come about, Dan? He said, well, he said, they asked me, what do you want to do with Homer Hatt? He said, I'm going to make him used car manager right now. And they said, fine. And that's how I got the job.
What year was that?
Oh, boy, Helen, now you got me. I would say
After the
70.
Oh, 97.
Early 70s, something like that, because I retired in 77.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd been early 70s or late 60s, someplace in there.
After the tornado.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, tornado was out.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting story, Homer.
And I guess you got about all of it. Can't think of anything else except
well, we really
what happened.
appreciate your sharing your experiences with the Oldsmobile History Center because, see, we didn't have a great deal on
Mhm.
the used car area, and we are trying to fill gaps
Yeah.
in Oldsmobile history.
Well, as I say, after I get through with some of this stuff, I'm going to just give you the whole thing.
All right.
And you'll have,
Appreciate that. And Homer, I appreciate your signing the agreement form.
oh, that's no problem. See, these are all those magazines I wrote too.
Marvelous. Oh, what a great reference.
See, this is one of the, see, this is some of the stuff that we would prefer for the dealers with these used car promotions and all these things. There's some of them in here yet.
Oh, how nice.
See, used car merchandising guides, and we told them what to do and how to handle.
Oh, very fine.
In fact, automotive market reports were sent to me all the time, and I used to write articles for the automotive market report.
Oh,
And yeah, see, it was telling here about who did what,
yes.
and the whole thing was, yeah, right here. There's one of the articles right there.
Let's see what we're looking at here. Oh, Homer Hatt, used car merchandising manager of GM's Oldsmobile division, took to the defense of independent automobile dealers and used car operations of new car franchise dealers in a recent letter to the Detroit Free Press. Hatt, who is well known in the nation's auto auction circles, wrote in response to articles written by Sylvia Porter and Alan D. Haas regarding the buying of used cars. Some of the articles explain how to buy a used car and how to deal with dealers. Said Hatt, I have been used car manager of Olds for quite some time. I have seen many used car dealers come and go, but I have also seen many used car dealers establish a reputable name. The National Independent Automobile Dealers Association has a fine group of members who operate on a high ethical standard, unquote. In addition to the independent dealers, he pointed out, quote, there are the new car franchise dealers who try to keep their used car operations at a high plane. Our new car dealers do not sell a little old lady car to everyone who comes to their lot for a used car. Many of our dealers have a fine reconditioning program and attempt to make certain the used cars are in good condition prior to putting them on the used car lot for sale. A dealer who has been in business for a long time must be selling good products, or the word-of-mouth publicity would have put him out of business. There are a few unscrupulous people in any business. Therefore, we should not insinuate that all used car operations are selling substandard merchandising or are overpricing all cars, Hatt concluded. Gee.
So I wrote a lot of that kind of stuff for her.
Very
And I say, I'm sure that someday you'll have this.
Well, that would be a pleasing addition to the Oldsmobile archives, because our mission is to preserve Oldsmobile history.
Well, see, this cover and all this stuff, I designed all this stuff too, and these covers, and shipped them all dealers so that they would have them.
Great. Well, when you're ready, we'll be glad to accept it.
I will, Helen. It probably won't be too long, but I just want to go through some of that stuff again, see if there's anything in there I particularly want to pull
Sure.
out, and outside that, I'll just let you have it all.
Well, Homer, we're going to conclude this interview. This is Friday, August the 2nd, 1991. Interview between Homer Hatt, former used car merchandising manager of Oldsmobile, and Helen Earley of the Oldsmobile History Center at EDC North GM Training Center, Lansing, Michigan.